Welcome to my podcast, Money Haggle. I'm Alex Rodowitz, and today we are going to be discussing my very first podcast, Volume 1, Episode 1, brand spanking new. We're going to be covering a variety of different topics, mostly some basic things such as haggling, determining buying prices and selling prices, and if we have some time, I'm going to touch upon some profit margins. So go get the popcorn, get yourself a nice comfy blanket, kick back because we're going to be here for a little while. So let's get into it. So let's talk about some of the ways that you haggle. First off, how I got good at haggling really started with, I started an eBay business in, I would say 2012, 2013, around that time. I ran it for about 2 or 3 years, and I really wound up learning how to haggle, not even online. That's where I kind of refined my skills. I actually learned it more in when I actually would go to a antiques market every weekend. How it would work would be, there was this, I remember, an underground garage and a parking garage. It was about 2 or 3 levels. It was called the Chelsea Market Antique Mall or something like that. Or the Hell's Kitchen Antique Mall, something along those lines. And pretty much what would happen is, like, about 50 or 100 vendors would come in. These people would set up these little tables, and it would sell anything from, little trinkets to, anything. Like, some stuff was like, what else? Like jewelry. They sold old toasters, like all like the unimaginable crap that you probably found in your grandparents' like cellar or attic. They probably picked it out of there and brought it there. There was also some really interesting, expensive things that people brought. Like, there was one guy who I remember would sell pieces of like precious art that was really amazing. Not museum quality, but definitely very nice stuff that some of the wealthier upper echelon people would pay to put on their walls for sure. I remember one guy came in and he was selling like a Picasso charcoal, etching or something like that. It was pretty amazing. So some people, they would have, and also there was antiques that were there, and that was really my forte. That's really what I was going after. So I would, finding antiques is not the easiest thing to do because you need some expertise really to figure out how to buy it and why it's important. And people might think, why does that even matter? Well, it's important because one, you should be studying your history because the more that you know in any business or any sort of field, the better off that you'll be in developing some sort of product or knowing why it's significant, why it's rare, why it's collectible. So that's really why having knowledge is important when it comes to buying and selling antiques. Also, going back to the whole history thing, it's also important. I'm a history buff and I love history, so that's really why I chose my niche of collecting and selling antiques, because I'm really into history and I love learning about why certain things were made the way that they were, or learning about why they were made a certain way, or where something came from. Things like that are very interesting to me, and I think that's important. And also, now that we live in a society where everything's really mass-produced, the things that people created back in the day were so had such a provenance to them that really lends a hand to the craftsmanship that really went into the items that people buy and sell all the time. I'm getting off on a tangent here. My apologies, but that's definitely my first piece of advice. Is definitely to study up, because buying and selling antiques, it would help to know history for sure, and to know when things came from what time periods. Another reason, just on that same idea, is that you might buy a clock from a certain time period, and I'm not even exaggerating. Like, you can, after you get good at antiques, you could start figuring out the years when things were made, just by the quality and the craftsmanship of what went into the products, even what it's made out of. I'm trying to, like, for an example would be like in the 40s, you might have had a clock made out of, more like, or in the 30s or 40s, you might have had more like wood sort of clocks where people were like handcrafting, these intricate pieces, or even making them out of metal or what have you. In the 50s, though, like, you had these like bubble clocks that were coming out that were like big in diners and things like that, just as an example. So knowing, like, seeing a piece of an antique like that, you can really just pick it out by eye, because you can tell the years and things like that once you get good at it, just as an example. So that's why studying up and having your knowledge is important. Also, the more that you know about your product, that helps you in your purchase. How so? So if you know that in a certain year, I'll even just give you a better example. Let's take a quarter, right? Now you're saying, okay, what does a quarter have to do with antiques? It has to do a lot with antiques. Not so much it being an antique itself, but for a coin collector, a coin made in the year 1965 or later has no value really to them. But a coin collector where a quarter was made before that year is very valuable, or it increases in value. Why? Just as an example, why knowing history is important? Because let's look back at what happened in World War II. During World War II, they were trying to reserve all the metals that they could save so that they could use them in the war effort. If you had a coin that was made during that year, it was very rare because they were being used in some way for metal, for artillery, and other things. So to have a coin of that year is rare. So the more that you know about history in that regard, the better off you'll be in figuring out how rare something is, how collectible it is, just as another example, of course. So, we talked a little bit about history and why that's important. Let's talk about how to figure out pricing. The best way to do this really is to go out and to really, I think eBay, I know, like, this may sound like a cop-out, but going to eBay, because the reason why I say it's a cop-out is because, like, eBay, like, that's how you figure out all your pricing, and the simple answer is yes. eBay actually has a great wealth of sales and statistics of how things sold. Remember, never look at how something is selling right now, currently, because, if you ever watch the show Pawn Stars, the guy Rick, who owns the store, his favorite line is almost, is that how much they're selling for or how much they're going for? If they're going for a certain price, doesn't mean that's the price that everything's being sold at, okay? So if that's the case, then you have to be very careful about how you buy things, okay? So my suggestion is, if you really are serious and want to get into learning more about how to buy and sell antiques, what I would do is go find your niche. Find something you're interested in. I know for me, this may sound strange, but it kind of developed the first time I went to the market to make my first purchase and to haggle with people. I was really just looking around, and I was just trying to figure out I would go to the city, and I live in the suburbs. So I would have to take public transit to get back and forth, so I never wanted to get anything too bulky to bring back with me because it would be heavy, right? So I would get something small enough that I could carry under my arm if it was that big, or smaller than that, and that had enough value. So I was walking around just trying to figure out, okay, what's not too big that I could buy that I think I can make some money on. And one thing that really stood out to me, and I know for a fact, and even if I see one today in an antique mall, or I go to an antique store and I see a nice price on it, I'll still buy it and still sell it for a profit, would be thermometers. So there's these, especially there's all different types of thermometers. A lot of them back in the day were used, or rather like handcrafted, with wood, and it doesn't really look all like, intricate or anything like that. But people like to collect them a lot. And one of the types of thermometers that people really love are ones that have an association with some sort of company. A great example, Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something like that. I remember the first one I ever bought was for a cigar brand. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was for, but it was great. It was fantastic. I loved the look on it. It was so old and so disgusting that it had spider webs on the back of it. Like, it literally came out of someone's grandfather's, like, attic somewhere. It was amazing. I was like, I'm having this. And the reason why why you're probably like, ew, that's really disgusting. Like, why would you buy that? I'm going to buy it because I know that something with that, that's just been sitting there and looking like that, people love the look, and I'm trying to think of the word. It's not coming to me, but that look to it, that old look to it, and they love old things that are collectible from that era. So picking up a thermometer is definitely a good place to start. That's how I started, and it was a great investment. I wound up making, I don't know, like $30 profit on it or something like that, which, to some people it may seem like a little bit, to other people it may seem like a lot, but I really didn't invest much. I sold it quickly, and it was an easy sell. So I know that in the future, those are really like, I start, finding a niche for the things that I'm looking for. And it really, I think, comes with, you could sit down and go into eBay and try to search a million things and try to keep your eye on it. But when it comes down to, like, let's say you go into a market like I was in, or even if you buy things online to resell, because people do that too. I'm not talking about like drop shipping, obviously, because I don't think you could really drop ship antiques or anything like that. But just regular, like, just buying individual items for the right price and then reselling them online, which you could definitely do. You can figure out the pricing for how much you're willing to spend, and the more that you know about it, the better off you'll be when you haggle it. I know one of my favorite quotes is, or one of my favorite ideologies is kind of like, you win the battle before you even step foot on the battlefield because you're so prepared that you can't be beaten. That sort of mentality. So that's kind of the mentality I bring into any sort of business transaction when I go and I haggle with people and make a purchase. So I kind of eye something out, and I never just go like, I know this may sound like an odd thing, and I'm just talking about in person. So this is obviously not going to happen online because people can't see you through the internet, but if, let's say, so I would go into the market, right, and there would be people standing around their stands, and I would go in, and if I saw something, I wouldn't get really excited about it. I'd see it, and I'd be like, yeah. In my head, I'd be like, or whatever, just, like, I could make money off of that. Like, kind of not giving them the impression that I'm really sold on it, but I could walk away without it. It's not going to kill me. Even inside, I might be like, I have to have this. This is such a great item. I can make a lot of money off of it. There's no need to show that excitement because they might take advantage of that. And you might not think so, but, a lot of communication is nonverbal. So I think it's like 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So if you're showing your hand already, people are going to take advantage of you. That's why I say that. So I would come in there and be like, yeah, this is okay, and then just check out everything else. And also what I would do is I would leave their stand. I would never just go in just head first. Sometimes I would, but rarely would I ever make an offer like right away. Even if I was about to leave their stand, like before I left, I would never be like, all right, I'm going to make an offer and then go to the next one. Every now and then would it happen? Yes, but it was rare that would happen. I would really just go around and check out the other items in the area, because the reason why I say that is because it all has to do with budgeting, and I'll talk about budgeting in a little bit. So, let's see. So I would go and check out the other items and kind of figure out what items would be of value to me, and kind of keep a mental checklist of all the things that I saw that I liked. Obviously, when I'm looking at the item, they would have price tags on them. If not, I would ask the people how much they are. Again, no reaction when they would ask me how much it is, because if you're giving them a look of disgust when they tell you it's too much money, that you want to pay, I always am of the impression that I don't care how much you say it is, I can get it down to the price I want it. And it doesn't really matter. If I can't, then it's not worth it to me, because we're just not on the same page at all. I feel like, when you're haggling and trying to make a deal, it's all about really creating a bond, if you think about it, because it's like you're kind of saying like, hey, I trust you enough that I'm going to give you this money, and it's good business because the person reciprocates by saying, I'll give you the price, I'll probably be here again, and we'll do business again. And I know that may not seem like that's the case, but to me, I notice that even when I make my sales on eBay or wherever else I sell, even in person, I notice that people will do more business with you. And they'll also even open up more streams of income to you, because they'll trust you more. And that's really what's important, when you're making any sort of business deal. It's a relationship. It really is. Anyway, so what I would do is I would check the price and see how much it is. If it's low, sometimes I would wonder, why is it so low? Check it out a little bit more, see, inspect it. That's always what you want to do when you grab an item. Always inspect it as much as possible and try to come up with a time period. Come up with the quality it's made of. Look for any maker's marks on it. If you don't know what maker's marks are, they're like little symbols that can determine what period or when something came from. You might see this more like on objects that are like metal or like a sword or something. I don't know, like you might not be in a market where they have swords or something like so intricate like that, or so old, but you never know. You might run into it. Also, you see maker's marks on things like old spoons and silverware and things like that, and other sort of items. So you could see things like that. Also pay attention to the decorations and how it's painted, the type of paint that's put on it, how faded it is, if there's staining, if it's clothes. And then we could talk. I would create another segment to talk about anything having to do with autographs and other things like that, because I could talk an hour about, and I don't think we don't have enough time in this segment to talk about that right now. But so you're doing your due diligence, you're really checking out the item. If you want me to go into detail more about the how to figure out what the item, where it comes from, or how to pick out whether it's worth it or not, or if it's really authentic, I can talk about that another time if it's requested. But right now I'm not going to get into that more. I'm just going to talk about the process of how to pick out items and haggle for them. That's really like the key focus of this session. So again, like I said, I'd be walking around and put the item down, figure out what I'm going to buy next. And once I have a list, I go back and I kind of think about all the items that I'm willing to pay for. Obviously, you want to make the most profit. So the best way to do this is to figure out how much everything was, finding out what was the cheapest products that you can buy, but also make the highest profit margin on. So I would go back to those people that had the products that were the cheapest, that I could make the most profit on, and I would would remember how much the price was, and maybe take a percentage of that and subtract it from the actual price that they're offering. So let me think of an example. I guess if, let's say I was buying, I'm going to try to think of a real example. of something and I bought for a lot cheaper. So like for instance, this didn't happen at a marketplace, but I bought it in what do you call it, an auction, an antiques auction. I bought an old banner. I think it was like a college banner from the 1940s or something. It was excellent, all handmade, stitched. It was beautiful. I think it was like $120, but I got it. I think they wanted to put. Hold on, scratch that. I'm going to talk about a different example. Never mind, because an auction isn't a great example, I guess, because auctions, they just go up and up and up. Let's talk about the market, actually, since that's what we're talking about. My mistake. So one time, I'm trying to think of another example where I bought something. All right, so I remember another thing. One time I bought it was actually another banner. It was a pendant from the Vietnam War, and it was beautiful. It was made of silk. It was completely authentic. The guy that had these antiques he just had the most beautiful things. He had the most random things I've ever seen in a collection, but like just really amazing. Like really, like it looks like he went out of his way to find these items, like really put hard into looking for them. So he had this pendant from, it was I believe a South Korean paratrooper regiment, like the 73rd or something like that. So I had a symbol stitched into it. It was made of silk. On one side it was like a pink silk, on the other side it was a black silk. And then it had like I forget what you call them, like the frilly things on the edges, like the strings. And it didn't have the stick that went with it, obviously, but it had, on one side it had the paratrooper symbol, and on the other side a star. It was so beautiful. And I think he wanted $70 for it. And I was like, I can't, I don't want to pay $70 for such a small item, even though it is very beautiful. So I started at half the price. I know that seems low. It's almost like I'm lowballing him, but it opens up conversation. It's a great way to start, because sometimes people, like, you never know. Some people just need the money and they're so desperate that they'll take it. So you just throw out an offer and they're like, no. Sometimes they're just like, absolutely not. But I've had people just go for it and they're like, okay, I'll do it. So sometimes you got to worry about that also. If they give it away so quickly, they might just be like trying to hustle you. So just be careful. Definitely second guess and wonder why it's so cheap. But if they give it to you for half the price, take it. If not, then try to go up in $5 to $10 increments. So I'd go up to 45. And I think he actually stopped there, from what I remember, 45 or $50, something like that. So he stopped there. And I kind of felt bad afterwards, because I remember I was talking to him. And remember, this whole, with buying and selling, it's a relationship. So, I like to talk people up also. And that's one thing you should do. You should really learn how to communicate with people, which is extremely important. And kind of find out, like, why are you selling it? Why are you here? Like, what's your deal, kind of thing. And his deal, what was happening with him was that he had some health problems, and he was trying to sell his items because he had to clear out this entire locker, and it was costing him too much money, and he had to get surgeries and all this other stuff. So I think I bought something else from him just because I wanted to help the guy out, and I gave him a little bit more money, so just to help him, because, we're all people and we all need help sometimes, right? So that, we did that. We did the deal, and it was good faith. And honestly, I actually went back and I wanted to buy more things from him, because this guy had such an amazing collection. He actually had a flag. It wasn't a Confederate flag. It was a Union flag, hand-stitched from the Civil War. It was amazing. He wanted, like $1,000 or $2,000 or something like that for it. And I probably could have made so much money on it, but I didn't have the cash on me, because otherwise I would have gone to the ATM. It was like the afternoon on a Saturday, so my bank was closed. I couldn't get the money. They probably would have froze my account if I tried to pull that out. So I was like, hopefully I'll be back. Unfortunately, I went back. I was going there for years, and he never came back. Unfortunately, I hope he's okay. Anyway, so we did the deal. Now, you have a great product, right? So, the problem with some of these products is, and what's going to happen is on eBay, if you try to search them, you can't find them. The reason is because some of these objects are just so ornate and so, just so unique that they weren't mass produced or handmade, and there might only be a few to maybe just one. And remember, it's just because something's rare doesn't mean it's valuable. If it's collectible, it has a little bit more chance of being valuable, but, because it's in demand. But it doesn't mean it's worth a ton of money. Some items are just naturally worth a ton of money. The craftsmanship that was put into this, the time, the effort, where the provenance, the age, the significance of where it came from, these are all factors that made this product be valuable. So I couldn't find it on eBay, but I found other pendants from that time period and how much they were worth. I think they were going for like 150, 200 or something like that. But I think they were all American. It's been a while, so I can't really remember off the top of my head exactly, but they were definitely worth a decent amount of money. But this one was unique because it was from South Vietnam. So there, the South Vietnamese side of the war wasn't American, even though we were, allied. And again, this helps, I knew this because I knew this information from learning about history and from learning about eBay. And also there's another great resource in case you want to learn more about information like this. You go to, there are military forums, there are history forums, there's an eBay community. It actually helps you identify items if you don't know where they come from. You can actually post up a picture and someone within 10 or 15 minutes will come and say, oh, I know exactly what that is. I remember one time my dad wanted me to sell something for him. He found at my grandma's house that was just sitting there. It was this thing that literally looked like a metal bowl with a piece attached in the middle that looked like a spur coming out of it, like off a boot. And I didn't know what the heck it was. I'd never seen such a thing before. And I posted on the eBay community, and within like 15 minutes, we found out it had something to do with making pottery. So it was really interesting. What it did exactly, I don't remember, but it was, something that we found and it was worth money. So, it helps. Being knowledgeable about your items can really make the difference in making profit and also buying it, like I said earlier. So I found I didn't find the exact item, but someone told me, I remember I posted on, I think, a military forum, and someone told me it was South Vietnamese, and it was from a certain regiment, like the 73rd Regiment or something like that. And, I looked it up. Nothing came up on it because, it's obviously a unique item and there's not many of these, and especially in the shape that this thing was in. That's another thing. Like, if you see something in fantastic shape and it looks old and it most likely is old, buy it. Try to haggle, bring down the price as much as you can, but most likely I wouldn't even worry about how much you're paying for it because you could probably really make a profit on it. Why I say this is because the item that I bought for, I think it was like $50 or something, 45. I wound up putting it up. I think I put on Etsy. I had a store on Etsy at one point, eBay and Amazon, and I think I sold on Etsy for $300. So I made a ton of profit on it. So it's possible. You can make a lot of profit on these items. It's all about doing your research, and it's all about haggling and buying it low enough to make the sale. So my suggestion is get out there, go buy these items, and put them up on eBay, and get yourself or rather connect with some sort of forum, or just do research on the item and try to figure out and learn more about the items that you buy, and just figure out how to just keep getting it in front of people, because eventually the more that you network, the more that you will turn a profit on it. And just going back to one last final thought, I just want to just bring up on actually buying the item, because some of you might be wondering, how do I actually know how it's worth it or how much money to start with to put out an offer? That's a tricky subject. I'll definitely cover that more in another session, and also selling it as well. I could do a session where I talk about buying it for one half and then selling it for the other half. So for buying it, I'll just talk about it briefly. I guess what I do is some people I know. I had a colleague I used to work with who actually I helped him actually build his eBay business, and he was doing really well with it. He would actually go and bring his phone and try to figure out what items are worth it to buy, and that's definitely a good way to do business. You could do that, and it saves you time and money. I actually would go with my gut, and I know that sounds crazy, but because I knew a lot about history and like just learning about things beforehand and like where they came from, and I would talk to the people that would also be selling the item and get their take on the item and where it came from and their knowledge of it. I would kind of make an educated guess and just try to, the reason why before I was talking about like quote unquote lowballing people, like giving them half the price that they're offering, because at least that at that point it's still a safe investment because you're not losing much. Because most people at these marketplaces, what they're doing is they're buying in bulk from estate sales, and they have to get rid of all their items. If they don't, what's going to happen is they're going to wind up putting it in some sort of storage unit, and that's going to be eating out on their profits because they have to pay monthly to store it. So they want to get rid of it as fast as possible, so they're not going to jack up their prices too much. That's why I say whatever price they're offering at, put it at half that price, and you should be good to go no matter what. It's really not even, sometimes it's not even about knowing the history, it's just more about simple economics and just buying at a reasonable price so that you can make a profit margin. You can reach your profit margin that you're seeking. So that's kind of how I would buy it. Like I said, I'm gonna make, I guess, another session where I really dive into it and how I do my research and try to figure out like what items are worth it to me and how much I would go on bidding for like smaller items or bigger items or whatever it is that people are offering. And then for selling, how I came up with that $300 profit, or why did I offer at that price? Well, how I figured, when I'm talking about the pendant, just to remind you guys, just to go back on that point, just to finish up here. So the reason why I offered it at $300 was because I had taken in consideration that a lot of American items from the Vietnamese War at that point was going for like 150 or something like that, or 100, 150. So what I did was I figured, the items that I saw also, the American ones, were so torn up, probably just from just being in the fight. They were just being destroyed from just being in the war. So they were just completely mangled. This thing was in just like pristine condition. So, which also begs to get you to buy items that are really just in fantastic condition if you can. Obviously, not everything is going to be in great condition. I still recommend buying it even if it's not in the greatest condition, but try to stick with items that really are in better shape than those that aren't. You're better off in the long run, and your profits will rise. So going back to how do you sell the item and how to price it. So to price it, you have to kind of do your research. I'm really just talking about items that you can't find anywhere else. So, and you have some sort of clue to go off of. In this case, I had, $100, $150 sort of range. So I figured, it's around that price. I could figure out where it's coming from and the origins, and I could figure out if it's rare and if it's collectible, since there weren't a ton of these being sold, but there was enough where it seemed like they were collectible to people in that sort of community, which again, you have to research and understand what people want in regards to collecting these sort of items. So once you know that, what you're going to do is you're going to take that item and kind of figure out a price where between that and doubling that price. If it's an item like the item I had, the pendant, the reason why I doubled it was because it was just so rare and it was just in such pristine condition. There was just so many, like if you had a checklist of all the things that a product had achieved, by going through it and saying they did this right, that right, it's in this condition, it's from this period, it's this collectible, it's people are buying it, all these things. It hit every one of those check marks, and I saw $300 in it. And that's kind of just how I figure it out. To some people that may just sound like, you may say, you're crazy, man. Like, I don't know how you could just come up with that number. But is it crazy when it sells for that much? Not really, because to somebody it's worth that much. And I'm just going to leave you with this because it's the last thing I'm going to say at this session, since we're all pretty much out of time. Items, they may sit in your eBay account or wherever you're selling, Shopify, wherever you're selling things, they will sell. It doesn't matter if it takes a day, an hour. I've sold things in 15 minutes before on eBay. I've sold things in 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. It takes time sometimes, and sometimes you have to sit on the item. But know this, everything that you put up will sell. It's not a question of will it sell, it's a question of when. Thank you for joining us, and you all be well for now. Go out there, go antiquing, and go make some money. If you like what you just heard, click the subscribe button under this video and click the bell so you can keep up to date with all the videos I'll be posting. I should be posting one every week, so tune in, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Take care.